On a prisoner transport plane, a highly dangerous and extremely mysterious man was being escorted on board. Unlike the others, his entire face was tightly wrapped, and his body was chained up with multiple locked restraints because of how dangerous he was. The guards tied him down alone in the very last row. Once the plane took off, the other prisoners began plotting their escape, but this man simply tilted his neck slightly, and a tooth embedded with a metal wire dropped from his mouth. He used it to pick the locks on his chains, but just then, an explosion ripped through the plane. One of the engines caught fire. The pilot struggled to make an emergency landing. Some prisoners were sucked out by the air pressure. Others fought desperately to steal the guard's key. The man finally broke free from his restraints. The guards noticed and rushed toward him, but he moved with lightning speed. None of them could stop him. The plane was still hundreds of meters above the ground, so the pilots were forced to crash land in a remote Alaskan valley. When the wreck finally hit the ground, the surviving prisoners immediately turned on the police. Amid the chaos, that mysterious man calmly stepped out from the smoke. Meanwhile, the sheriff of a nearby town got word of heavy smoke in the area. To investigate, Frank and his deputies took off in a helicopter. When they arrived at the crash site, they found only a few dead officers and empty, broken handcuffs scattered around. But then, to their surprise, they discovered one police officer who was still alive. A dozen inmates survived the crash, and all of them escaped into the wild. These men were extremely violent, and for the nearby small-town residents, they instantly became the biggest threat to everyone's safety. Among them was one particularly dangerous and classified criminal, Havelock. In the chaos, he changed into the uniform of a dead marshal. Pretending to be a blinded officer who'd been attacked in the crash, the local sheriff rescued him and rushed him to the hospital. But once there, Havelock kidnapped the sheriff's wife. By the time Sheriff Frank arrived, both his wife and the fugitive were already gone, but that wasn't his only concern. On his way to the school, Frank got a call from one of his deputies. They told him that earlier that day, his son had skipped class with a female classmate, and neither of them had been seen. Since meanwhile, Havelock had reached the town's communication tower. He broke the lock, set the place on fire, and blew it up. Moments later, Frank's team reported that all communications were down, and suddenly, Havelock's voice came through their radio. He said he used to do a lot of dirty work for the agency, and that he no longer trusted the CIA. That's why he kidnapped Frank's wife, because he needed Frank to be his messenger and ordered him to wait for further instruction. By the next morning, many fugitives who couldn't survive the freezing cold were captured, but several dangerous men were still out there hunting for chances. Some even started blocking cars right in the middle of the road. Meanwhile, a tour group was sitting in their vehicle watching the reindeer, but on the other side of the bus, several escaped prisoners suddenly appeared. They were moving quickly toward the tourists. Now they had made their way straight to the sightseeing vehicle. Seeing the convicts closing in, one of the men shouted for the driver to step on it, but before they could move, a bullet hit the man. The prisoners rushed forward, ready to board the bus. The driver grabbed a rifle and tried to fight back, but the inmates were already inside, and one of them took a hostage in an instant. All 21 passengers on board became hostages. Before long, the police received a photo posted from one of the tourists' accounts. That's how they learned the vehicle had been hijacked by the escaped prisoners. What they didn't realize, however, was that the message had actually been sent by Havelock himself. Inside the tour bus, the radio picked up a transmission from headquarters. Sensing that something wasn't right, one of the prisoners ordered the driver to cut the engine. Then he turned his gun on Havelock. He recognized him, the masked man who'd been on the crashed prison plane. But when the prisoner demanded answers, Havelock said nothing, because at that very moment, he was hacking into a CIA agent's account. Moments later, a state police helicopter landed nearby. Troopers jumped out, securing the perimeter. They loaded the wounded into ambulances as Frank caught his breath. Without wasting a second, Frank gathered everyone together. He quickly went over what had happened and made one thing clear. Their top priority now was to seal off the entire valley. No one in, no one out. Frank then ordered his men to contact every hospital in the area and trigger full emergency protocols immediately, because this was just the beginning. There would be more injuries coming, wave after wave.